avoided emotions in part because I hadn't really learned much about them, but they also didn't make sense to me. We often put logic and emotions at odds with each other. That certainly is how I thought. And the more that I started to allow space for my emotions, I started to realize that some patterns and themes emerged. There actually was a little bit of sense to be made of them. When I started to think about emotions as data or input, it started to make more sense. And I realized I just didn't understand what the data was trying to tell me.
Partner betrayal is disorienting, heartbreaking, and results in absolute confusion for the betrayed partner. You worry that nothing in your life was real, and you fear that you will never be able to trust your spouse or yourself again. Well, welcome to the Rebuilding Trust podcast with Carol the Coach. I'm Carol Jurgensen-Sheets, aka Carol the Coach, and what I can promise is that when you listen to my podcast, you'll begin to believe that there is hope. We will be hearing from experts all over the world who specialize in problematic sexual behavior, sex addiction, and infidelity. Together, we will be asking them the hard questions about how you both can rebuild safety, find strengths, grieve and mourn what you had, what you never had, and what you fear you will never find again. The truth is that rebuilding trust is possible, and I am going to show you the steps to working together to build a whole new marriage based on the honesty, authenticity, and transparency that your marriage deserves. Rebuilding Trust with Carol the Coach.
Well, welcome everybody to Rebuilding Trust with Carol the Coach. That's what this podcast is all about, improving your relationship and rebuilding the trust to get over there to restoration, or as I call it, post-traumatic growth. And I was on my listserv. Many of you know that being a CSAT, I am able to be part of an organization where we can email each other, ask questions, share our tools, our books, our projects. And so I saw this project that came up, and it was right up my alley. Many of you know I've written Help Her Heal. And after explaining about the brain science of partner trauma in the first chapter, my very next chapter was on emotions and feelings, because I felt like, I always say, I don't know what really happened, but men with problematic sexual behaviors seem to lack the ability to identify their feelings. And I know that is because they didn't get socialized. They didn't necessarily get encouraged to identify their feelings. But I also think that problematic sexual behavior can really fog up feelings. So I heard about Tim Burkholder's incredible new course, and I said, okay, I am all about this. I'm reaching out immediately to see if he'd come on the podcast and talk about the logic of emotion. So Tim, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Carol. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I am really thrilled you're doing this, because I don't think men have enough resources to work through these issues. Now, I know it's not just for men. It's for anybody who wants to hone their emotional identification, skills, recognition. But tell me, because I've read a little bit about your bio, how in the world did an engineer, right? You were an engineer in your last life?
Yeah, that's where I started out in my undergrad.
Okay, so you started out in your undergrad, and then what happened?
Yeah, this project is born out of a deeply personal place for me, and I grew up in a home. I think you mentioned this earlier. A lot of times, men don't get socialized into emotions, and I grew up with this understanding that emotions weren't really for men. And even in the context and the family system that I grew up in, anger was not even really allowed. And so all of these emotions just got shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And, I found myself, a lot of people make it all the way to midlife. I found myself in a quarter life crisis because I had done all the right things, valedictorian in high school, graduated top of my class in engineering. I was working at Lockheed Martin in an engineering leadership development track. And so everything was going right, except I just had a breakdown. I ended up clinically depressed, unable to focus, function at work. And so fortunately, I had a really good friend who pointed me to a counseling practice that really, I think, in many ways might have saved my life. It started me on a journey towards understanding my emotions, understanding kind of what was going on in my family systems, and the tools that I had at the time. I would have said I thought my way into this. I can think my way out of it,
Uh-huh.
and that could not have been more wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so 5 years after that, I found myself in a graduate program, and I was working on a master's in mental health. And so 10 years later, I'm here.
Well, I'm so glad you are here. And, to be so transparent and talk about that internal struggle. So many of my heroes have done that. Patrick Carnes, the father of sex addiction. Almost every great achiever, well, Patrick Carnes says it best. They come from suffering, and then suffering creates transformation, and then transformation leads to giving back. And so what prompted you to create this course, and tell us more about it? The logic of emotions.
Yeah, I think what prompted this really is a long journey of trying to figure out and understand my own emotions. I think I avoided emotions in part because I hadn't really learned much about them, but they also didn't make sense to me. And so we often put logic and emotions at odds with each other. That certainly is how I thought as an engineer. These are sort of diametrically opposed things. And the more that I started to allow space for my emotions, I started to realize that some patterns and themes emerged. There actually was a little bit of sense to be made of them. And certainly as an engineer, and a computer engineer was my discipline,
Wow.
we would run, compile software, and then we would get flags that would say, there's errors here. There's something up, there's something off. And so when I started to think about emotions as data or input, it started to make more sense. And I realized I just didn't understand what the data was trying to tell me. And so I really came to see and believe that there are three intelligence centers or information centers that we can make intelligence out of. And that's the head, obviously how we think about things and how we normally think about intelligence or IQ. But also the heart and the body are giving us a lot of data. And I think emotions provide information and aren't just random reactions.
Well, I am forever saying that we are guided in decision making and in just taking perspective of what's going on based on what we think, our intellect, what we feel, our heart, our emotional center, and then what we know, which is our gut, our intuition. So I like that you didn't address the intuition specifically or the gut, but you called it the spirit or the soul.
I think about it. I think gut is a good way to think about it, but I think about it more through the lens of body. Like our body is giving us a felt sense. We have this, these different sensations within our experience that might be distinguished. I think sometimes we use these words back and forth interchangeably, emotions and feelings, but I'm distinguishing those as emotion and maybe sensation or that gut sense.
Well, and I see them interlocked. When I talk about empathy, I say you've got to be able to take somebody's perspective, and then you have to recognize their emotionality, which runs from the head to the body. And then you have to link it to what is that emotion saying? What is the feeling? What are you hearing? And then do that non-judgmentally. So if somebody's going off, maybe you can understand that he or she is traumatized or has had a stressful day or had to put down their dog or whatever brings up that emotion. And we know it gets really, really blurred when you've suppressed emotions most of your life, you know?
Yeah, I think that's right. And, I came to really use this. Most of what I offer in this course is stuff that I've collected and borrowed from so many people. I don't even know that I could cite all the sources, but from someone, this analogy made sense to me. This lights on the dashboard of a car metaphor, and that really they're indicating and alerting us to something that's going on at a deeper level. And the function of those lights is first that they indicate that something needs attention. This is the paradigm we apply to all of the core emotions. But what are they indicating? What are they trying to say? Then they also invite some appropriate action. So what can we do as a response to the emotion that's showing up? And then what's the impairment? If we don't tend to that emotion, what might be likely to happen? And so I think about like when the gas light comes on in my car, I don't like when it comes on because it's going to cost me $40 or whatever the current rate of gas is. But I like that it's there and it's letting me know that there's something for me to tend to. And if I do so, then I can continue to utilize that vehicle. And if I don't, I think what I had experienced in quarter life was I just put duct tape all over the dashboard. And I had ignored everything. And then I wondered why I was broken down on the side of the road and non-functional.
Well, you picked that, which is kind of a no-brainer. But I get that message on my dashboard, that indicator, if you will, that something is ajar or amiss. And I quickly look up in my book, what does that mean? What does that mean? Well, it doesn't specifically tell me what it means. It tells me that it needs attention. First thing I did was I tried to read about it, and then it needs attention. And that's usually the support of a technician or my car dealership or my husband. And then, of course, I get it fixed. But if I get distracted or I get scared, what does that mean? It's going to cost me a lot of money. I hate not knowing things, and I avoid getting it fixed or looking into it, going deeper, as you called it. It just compounds problems and issues and ends up costing me more money. So your course identifies how to do that deeper dive into your emotional state of well-being or not well-being. Tell us a little bit about that course and who has supported you in putting this together.
Yeah, I think the support has really been over the last 20 years or so since I started my own counseling journey. That first counselor that I had, who was an intern at a graduate program, and so helpful in my understanding and getting to realize that actually men can have emotions, and I actually had a lot of them, and I just didn't really know what to do with them. And so from that very first counselor to all the counselors I've had along the way, I certainly resonate with that sense of needing a technician in my own experience. So I've had a lot of support. I worked a lot through grad school on just trying to better make sense of and unpack, understand what's going on underneath the hood. So in my engineering degree, the first lab project and a lab assignment that we had our freshman year was to take a battery operated screwdriver, disassemble the whole thing as a power tool, and then explain all of the components and all of the parts. And that's sort of what I wanted to do with this sense of my emotional landscape. What were the different parts? What do they do? What's the function? How do they work together? And if I could understand a little bit more about, there actually is a reason and a rationale maybe to them. And I love what you were saying earlier about taking perspective. We can maybe zoom out a little bit and realize this fits into a larger context and a larger story that actually can help us to navigate and regulate what we're experiencing.
Well, I love your metaphor too. I was just training my CSATs there in Mod 2. And, I said, my favorite person in the world, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but it's Milton Erickson. And he was a hypnotherapist that said, people understand things better when you give them a metaphor. And it sounds like your course, the logic of emotions, is more easily explained when you do metaphors, when you talk about the dashboard. And I'm thinking about you personally. Tim and I don't know each other, but we've seen each other's work on the listserv, and we've been contributors. And now I'm going to tell you, spray yourself with Teflon. You ready? There is a stereotype about engineers engineers and surgeons, they don't necessarily feel. Their skill is in analyzing, but they don't necessarily feel. And then you're a man, and men haven't been socialized. And so ultimately that was 2 strikes against you. And then you mentioned it earlier, your family of origin also contributed to that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll give you a third strike. I grew up with Germanic kind of Mennonite Amish heritage. Oh. And with all of the stoicism and lack of emotionality that comes with that. So not just immediate context, but generational context.
Yeah, epigenetically, you had that from way back when. For our listening audience, epigenetics is the study of our culture and our previous generations and how they seep into our souls and into our DNA. And so you're right, Mennonites and Germanic heritage, and you really did have, and we shouldn't call it strikes against you, but you really did have some tethers that said, don't feel, don't talk, and don't necessarily trust. Now, tell me why your course would be so helpful in the world of sex addiction and maybe partner betrayal, but especially sex addiction.
Yeah, I think this is, so one of the things that we do here is a Facing the Shadow intensive, which is, it's a 3-day workshop that's working through that Facing the Shadow material. And our very first talk, the very thing we start with is it includes this emotional awareness piece. And I think that is because I see very much that the energy of addiction is escape. And often what addiction is trying to do is to get away from these uncomfortable emotions. And in a lot of the addiction cycle literature, you're going to notice that the cycle that plays out is there's some sort of trigger that happens. Then you move into preoccupation, you move into ritual that starts to become behaviors, and then you cross your bottom lines, and that's acting out. I like to even add before the trigger, I just call it a pre-trigger. And I think about it as our emotional state. How are we feeling internally, and how does that make us potentially vulnerable to triggers, intrusive thinking, seeing something, or wanting to make some contact with somebody? When we can understand the underlying emotions that are playing out, it gives us so much more of a head start in recognizing the addiction cycle and where it might begin from there. And so I think it takes a good bit of intentionality and therapeutic work to actually get in tune with all of these information centers, but certainly the emotional side of things, and the body awareness and what am I thinking, we're working from the very start to try to bring some integration to those pieces, just because I think it's essential to understand what you're feeling to be able to find recovery.
Well, and the great Patrick Carnes obviously taught me. I graduated from my CSAT in 2007, and you mentioned a book, Facing the Shadows, which is almost the Bible, if you will, at looking at yourself, looking at your behaviors, looking at your denial, looking at your excuses, and then looking at all the contributing factors and creating a recovery plan that allows you to not be maladaptive anymore, but feel the feelings and make different choices. And if you remember, and you probably have used this, that recovery kit has men writing to their addiction every day. And sometimes talking about, how did you protect me today? I know you meant to protect me. It got in my way. It actually caused me more problems. But I think sometimes addiction is not this big bad hairy wolf, even though it is, but it's also that maladaptive coping style of, I can't handle this and I'm going to wrap my arms around you and keep you from having to deal with whatever pain you have. And I bet your course addresses that, doesn't it?
Yeah. So what we're really trying to get at is that the idea is not about trying to eliminate emotions or avoid them or run away from them, but how do we work with them, understand them, and build a bigger capacity to be with them? And so really we're wanting to create more resilience through awareness, through acceptance, through being able to notice what's going on, to name what's going on, and to navigate through the things that we're experiencing. We use that paradigm as well. How do I notice? How do I name? How do I navigate this?
Are you looking for hope, healing, and real connection on the journey through sex addiction or betrayal trauma? LitPath is inviting you to join us June 25th to 27th in Nashville for the CSBD Hope for Healing Conference, the nation's leading event focused on awareness, recovery, and reducing stigma. This conference is for individuals in recovery, partners and couples seeking healing, and clinicians or coaches looking for advanced training and continuing education credit. Hear from leading experts, experience powerful sessions, and connect with a community that truly understands.
Hi there, this is Tim Stein.
I'm Dr. Jake Porter.
Hi, I'm Jeannie Battoni.
Visit csbdhopeforhealing.org. That's csbdhopeforhealing.org. Use code PODHOPE25 for an exclusive 25% discount. Break the silence. Reduce the stigma. Find hope and healing. We'll see you there.
What do I notice? How do I name it? And then how do I navigate it? The 3 N's.
That's right.
Uh-huh. That's good. Now, did you know that was the 3 N's?
Probably.
Okay. It doesn't sound like it was on the top of your brain, but I love when we can help our clients go, okay, how did I get into this? Well, it's the 5 A's, it was affordable. It was anonymous. It was accessible. And you just go down the line and it helps them remember that there were pieces that just fell into place for addiction. And there are certainly pieces that fall into place for good recovery, this being one of them. We're going to talk more about the course, but I'm sure I've got people that are saying, how do I find this course? What do I do? What would you tell them, Tim?
Yeah, so in terms of finding the course, it's offered. Our practice here in Orlando is Charis Counseling Center, and we have a sister site called charis.courses. And so you could just go to that website, CHARIS, charis.courses. And the Logic of Emotions is one of those courses that's offered there. And so that would be a way to access the course. If you're local, we do run groups going through this course a couple times a year. And so you could give the office a call to get signed up on that. And occasionally we'll offer a virtual version of that as well. So sometimes it's helpful to interact with other people around this content and just begin to talk about how do you experience these emotions, how somebody else experiences it, and that can help build everybody's experience a little bit more.
Well, and you know that I am such a believer in group work. I mean, this course is obviously something anybody can do on their own, and they can go through it. How many chapters or lessons or mods are there?
Yeah, that's a great, I'm not sure the exact number, but I think it came out to right around 14.
Okay.
So we've broken it up into 8 core emotions, but then we have some additional chapters that explain how we use emotions and talk about some deeper topics. So I think it ended up around the 14 or 15 mark.
Okay. And I was going to ask you, I'm a big believer in group work because when one man does his work, everybody else gets a lot out of that. So when they come back and they say, this is how I processed it, it takes some of the work out of your own work to watch somebody else do their work. And you realize that's the work I need to do too. You don't have to have that awareness. You can go right into acceptance, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, with group work, my experience is that probably about 70% of what you get is not when you're in the hot seat or you're the one that's sharing or working on something. It's gleaned from everybody else's experience. And so I love getting to do this in groups. And we do some fun things like, the week we're talking about sadness, bring in the saddest song that you've heard. And we're going to listen to some sad songs and just see how it feels in our body to do that. And so, yeah, it's a fun thing to do in a group setting. I think anybody can take this content and do it with some friends or in a group.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the 8 core emotions, and you know that in that Help Her Heal series, Help Them Heal, Help Couples Heal, and soon to be Help Him Heal, we talk about the primary 5: anger, sadness, loneliness, fear, and happiness. And then we talk about shame and guilt. What are your 8 feelings or your 8 emotions?
Yeah. So I think there's so many different ways to think about emotions, and I don't really think that any of them are wrong.
Right.
And so I think it's about what makes the most sense to you. And part of that's where this course was born out of, is trying to figure out what actually made sense to me. You mentioned at the top of the show that there's not a ton of resources for men to figure out their emotions. And so I just paid attention to what made sense in my experience. And so I've really distilled what I think are the 8 core emotions. And I think about it through this lens of like primary colors. We've got 3 building blocks of color that make up the millions of shades of nuance of color that exist in the world. And I think I thought through the lens of distinction, what make each of these things unique. And I agree with a lot of the other clinicians and other ways of talking about it. But the ones that really, really resonated most with me for my own therapeutic work and recovery journey were these core 8 emotions. So glad, lonely, sad,
all
hurt.
Yes.
Yeah. Hurt, anger, fear, guilt, and shame. So we're not that far off here.
No, I think the only one that you named that I don't have, but I do put it under sad, because I believe in the 5 being an umbrella, and then you've got 50 under each feeling, would be hurt. And boy, I can imagine that when men get in touch with the pain, with the hurt that they've experienced and repressed or suppressed or got punished for sharing, it is so liberating for them, and it really acknowledges what they've been holding on to.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so I had to know what the 8 were. Again, I'm talking to Tim Burkholder, who has put together a course on emotions. And it sounds like a contradiction, but it's the logic of emotions. And so he's figured out a way to explain it, to take, in particular, men through it so that they'll have better emotional IQ. And without the shame. You know, you said guilt and shame were the other two emotions. And in this work with sex addiction, whether it's inherent shame culturally, religiously, spiritually, or because there's been a partner, male or female, that has been devastated by it, shame is a natural byproduct. And yet shame really does hold you back from getting enough. It holds you back from liking yourself enough to continue to move forward. Now, I bet the guys in your group eat this up to be able to talk about shame.
Yeah, I think, growing up in a religious context, we often put guilt and shame together as if they were two sides of the same coin. You could hardly say one without the other. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, it was really transformative to realize that I think they're fundamentally different mechanisms that are at play. Mm-hmm. And one is looking at the behavior. So guilt would say I did something wrong. I think this is pretty a common understanding of the differentiation. But guilt is looking at what I did. Shame is looking at who I am. I am something wrong, or there's something wrong with me. And I think as such, we look at in the course at how guilt actually invites something different than what shame invites. And the impairments are different as well. And so guilt actually, I think of it like the GPS course correction. Like I made it a wrong turn, or I'm on the wrong path. And guilt is the invitation to change behavior. It's maybe the invitation to repair with somebody else or to make amends. And so guilt always has a way forward and a way out, where shame often feels like a dead end street. Mm-hmm. If I am just bad, then there's nothing I can do about it.
Right. There's self-loathing takes over.
Self-loathing takes over, and then shame drives more secrecy, continued acting out. And shame really impairs that ability to connect or get in touch with empathy, where guilt actually can invite connection through repair.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so a lot of the couples work I do is helping partners to understand that and invite their spouse to look at that course correction, or to use gentle, constructive compassion or self-compassion, or to link it back to a childhood experience where they first learned how to do that. And that's what I really love about couples work, is that men have not necessarily had the skills, but they are hungry for them. And women have the skills, but they're in that trauma state where they can't necessarily, or choose not to, be vulnerable to them. And so when you put them together and you teach them together, it is an amazing thing. And do you work with many women, Tim?
I don't work with a ton of women. I do work with a couple, but I tend to work primarily with male addicts in individual and group settings.
Mm-hmm. Because I would imagine that any woman that worked with you would see you as a breath of fresh air, because they're seeing a man who is vulnerable enough to say, I had my own issues, and through the course of therapy and other support groups, I got to that post-traumatic growth, that giving back. And then with your intellect, it kind of sounds like you're brilliant, Tim. So with that intellect, you were able to put together something for other men to help them. Now, how long have you been at, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, that's the hope. I hope that some of my kind of fumbling and wrestling and the pain of my journey could offer some hope or some benefit to somebody else. And so, yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Now, when did you graduate with your CSAT?
I believe that was like 2017, 2018, 2016, somewhere in there. I'd have to check the records. But
Yeah, the stats on that. And you are a supervisor.
I am, yeah, I do. We've got a team here of 6 people that are either CSATs, training in CSAT, work with partners. And so I serve as our clinical supervisor here for the CSAT team.
You got your own inherent committee of learners that you can open their eyes to this disease, disorder, whatever, and give them some hope that they can instill hope in others, right?
Yeah, I think that's been a common theme in the trajectory of my story is always wanting to give back from the places where I've received, and then put it into the next generation of people that are coming behind. And so, how do I help train up others and help them feel and move toward that place where they could maybe find gratitude for their own story and use it in a way that could help and serve others.
So what I believe is what I know from, I've had 3 podcasts and they all are kind of collapsing in on each other. This is the newest one. And oftentimes it's the woman who will listen to the show and then ask her husband to listen either with her or by himself to get the information. And you just shared that if you go to the website courses, they can at least find out more about that and do a deep dive into what you have to offer, what are the mods or what is the training. And that runs, you believe, 14 weeks. How many weeks is that?
Yeah, so the way that I break the group up is we do 8 weeks. We just take 1 week for each emotion. And the way that I like to run it is give each week a focus and to really sit with, marinate in. So if we're picking, hurt or anger for the week, let's notice, where's that showing up this week? How does it show up? How do I experience that in my body? How have I experienced that across my lifespan? And we've got some worksheets that go along with each module. And so we give each person a worksheet with some prompts to think through those questions. Those are available on the course as well. And then there's usually some assignment. There's something that we're inviting people to do. So it might be thinking about that sad song and how have they experienced sadness through art. And so usually there's some assignments and reflections and a recap of the core content.
Wow. It sounds like an incredible group. It sounds like an incredible course. Are you too busy? Can they work with you in addition to that? Or are you pretty much out of commission for taking new clients?
Yeah, so I've got a fairly restricted availability for new clients. I'm also currently working on some body integration. So I'm doing the somatic experiencing practitioner training. And so I'm looking to build my experience in that role. And so for the right fit, I do have some very, very minimal availability, but I am taking people to work in group settings. So I continue to operate groups. And then for our intensives, I will work with people in our group intensives as well.
And where are you located?
We're in the Baldwin Park neighborhood of Orlando, Florida. So
right.
Yeah, our intensive really serves the Central Florida community. We do it on a Saturday so that people don't have to take time off of work and travel to another state or something like that to benefit from an intensive. But we sort of serve coast to coast, Jacksonville to Miami. People could drive here on a Saturday. We'd love to have them for the intensive.
I thought about teasing you because I'm doing that snowbird thing and I'm in Naples, Florida right now.
Yeah.
And you were close to Orlando, and I thought, wow, Orlando has a lot of CSATs, don't they?
Yeah, it's really grown. When I started, I think there was only one male CSAT in the Orlando area. And so it's been good to watch that as part of the growth of our practice. As I have filled up my practice, we've brought a bunch of other people along to help meet the need of the community. And
well,
so
I know I was thinking that you may not be taking clients, but in your supervision and in the fact that you worked with somebody who hadn't graduated yet way back when and got so much help, you would probably be able to identify people that did have more availability that were excellent in this logic course, right, of emotions.
Yeah, so we work at the CSAT part of our practice is just a small component of our broader practice. And so we have a number of really skilled clinicians here. And if somebody wanted to really work on the emotional course with a therapist, we would have plenty of people to help them find some assistance.
Well, I'm going to give you a tip, and it's maybe something you've already been doing, but I think you should offer a discount for men that want to go through the course again, or men that want to go through the group again, or men that want to take the intensive again, because my experience, at least with my courses, is once men's eyes have been open to that liberation and to knowing themselves better and to dealing with those childhood issues and dealing with how it affects their body, they're hungry for it and they want to know more. So maybe a little discount the second time around.
Yeah, I love that idea. And even the way that we've got our course structured right now for the logic of emotions is it's a pay what you can model. So we're not looking to kind of, blow the roof off of this thing with charging a whole bunch of money for it. We have a small administrative minimum, but beyond that, we want this to be accessible to anybody. And so we're offering some, what is kind of a discount sliding scale sort of thing. But yeah, we want this to be something that people can use, and where finances is not something that would keep somebody from being able to benefit from it.
I remember that. And we aren't allowed on a podcast to talk about price. But I remember when you were talking about this, it was dirt cheap. And, unfortunately, but understandably, when it comes to CSATs and the work they do and the work they create, we've been taught through ITAP, our governing body, to charge money for that. We spent tens of thousands of dollars on our certification. Consider yourself a specialist and you need to get what you deserve. And I remember when you were discussing it, it was almost free. I mean, you called it a small administrative cost, but that I was so grateful because so many of our clients have spent now thousands and thousands of dollars on their recovery, their kids' recovery, their wife's recovery.
I think with sex addicts, often emotional growth stopped about the time that acting out started. Mm-hmm. And so we've got to make this something that's accessible enough that somebody who's coming in that doesn't really understand hardly anything about emotions might be able to pick something up. And so that's the heart behind the course. It really is. It's not addiction specific. It really is emotion specific. And our hope is that anybody who is asking this question, like, why do emotions exist, or how come they don't make any sense, might be able to get something out of it.
Okay, good, good, good. I think that's wonderful. So that it's offered to anybody, and that would be your groups. But the course itself, a husband and wife
Yeah.
could get it.
Yeah. We've had, in our in-person groups, we've had husband and wives do the course together, but then we offer this course as part of the in-person experience. We give access to the online course as well, and so people have gone back through and been able to think about in kind of on their own time and not on the group timetable how this material might apply to their lives.
Oh, fantastic! Because that was my second question. What I know, I have courses too, and what I know is that what may be most helpful, specifically for a male sex addict, oftentimes is viewed with his wife. She wants to see what he's learning. She wants to be able to dialogue. And most importantly, she wants to understand what's going on emotionally inside of him. So I'm so happy that you offer that co-ed, although obviously a lot of our partners would not want their husbands going to group unless they were there for understandable reasons. They see women as a threat because women in the past have been a threat. Hopefully that gets healthier with recovery, but it's just a natural byproduct. So again, you offer so many options to get this information: the course, intensives, groups, and individual work with people that understand the course. So thank you so much. And again, I want our clients to take a look at your website, and that is www.charis.courses, and then look for the course specifically on the logic of emotions. I am so excited that you did this, and continued success, and keep me posted on other projects, especially with the certification you're getting in somatic experiencing.
Yeah, awesome. It's great to be here. I appreciate the invitation, and yeah, we'll definitely keep you in the loop with anything else that's coming out soon.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim, and hope to see you at the next symposium.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, take care.